Will Naomi be going to Paris? Or will something else happen with the championship? Gosh, we're going to speak about that and more. This is Wrestle Extra. Yo. This is Wrestle Extra. I'm your boy, A Dazzle, the Black Wrestling Advocate. Always joined by my tag team partner, the Oracle, the man that is Gerard Bonner. My friend, how's things going? Anything crazy happening this week?
Oh my goodness, I am good. We just had a big show with Southern Honor this past Friday night, and
Nice.
massive crowd, like way over 700 people. It was kind of nuts. Anthony Agogo shows up, Billy Gunn shows up. Like it was a wild, wild night. So yeah, we had a great time. We had a great time, and here we are back here, ready for some more great conversation about all things in Black wrestling.
Yeah, man, for sure, for sure. Obviously, the biggest news was something that kind of, showed up just before Raw went on air, about a couple of hours before Raw went on air. The scheduled match that we knew about from last week was Naomi defending the championship against Io Sky. But the news came out that she was not medically cleared to have the match. The show even started with Michael Cole mentioning it and also saying, keep tabs on the socials and we'll give you further information when we know. But we didn't get anything. It seems as though there's a possibility that she won't be medically cleared to have her match against Stephanie Becker at Clash in Paris, which is this weekend. What are your thoughts on this whole situation? When you first heard about what happened yesterday, what are you thinking?
It's interesting. Her not being medically cleared for the match last night, they obviously had to announce it because it was kind of the marquee match. You could argue it was probably going to be the main event since it's the world
Mm,
title. So her not being medically cleared and nobody specifically saying why could have been a number of things, right? Like it could have been a cold, could have been a stomach virus, something along that line. But we really had no indicator. We do know she was in the building,
mm.
so it wasn't something that kept her from attending. I don't know if she, didn't pass a physical, got a little ill. I'm not sure what it is. Now, the real question comes, for one, does this impact the match in Paris?
Mm.
We saw Stephanie Vacour backstage who mentioned, hey, I was supposed to get a title shot as well. Rhea's talking about, I too was supposed to get a title shot. So, Paris is still about 2 weeks away. So the question now is, will she be okay for Paris? If not, are we looking at something that is a long-term injury? I mean, if you're talking about 3 weeks that you're missing, that's certainly not it's not a deal breaker. Whatever it is, it must be serious enough for that not to be able to happen. So I think we're just going to have to watch and see. Obviously, all of our hopes and thoughts are that it is not something that would cost her this title reign, that she has waited her whole career, honestly, for
Mm.
this kind of positioning, for this level of momentum. I do hope that it's something that isn't major. Maybe, like I said, I'm hoping it's just stomach virus, something of that nature, since she was actually able to make it to the building last night.
It's interesting. So Io Sky ended up facing Roxanne Perez,
Hmm.
and also ended up losing the match
Hmm.
with Asuka and Kairi Sane kind of being involved in the result and bumping heads and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's been mentioned that that was probably like the way the match was going to finish with Naomi. So it
Mm.
looks like the WWE are pushing more, with Io Sky at least, pushing this whole thing or tension between her and Asuka and Kairi Sane.
Hmm.
Um, so we know that more than likely, it was going to be Naomi that heads to Paris with the championship in hand.
Yeah.
But my question is, what happens if Naomi doesn't go to Paris, isn't medically clear to go to Paris? What do you think either could or maybe even should happen?
Well, I think, that will really be determined on the severity of whatever this injury or issue is that's causing her not to be medically cleared. Considering that Paris is 3 weeks or 2 weeks away, you're looking at a 3 week thing. Now, my brain is kind of very much in what has been kind of wrestling folklore, which is if you can't defend the title in 30 days, then they'll strip you. That actually happened, ironically, to Naomi in one
Mhm.
of her first WWE title reigns, where she ended up being stripped because of injury and would end up coming back and winning it at WrestleMania in Orlando. So certainly, now I don't know if they're holding fast to that. I do think missing one PLE isn't a deal breaker in terms of whether or not she should be stripped of the championship. She would have to be out for something, around several months that would show she couldn't defend the championship. Uh, is that going to happen? I don't know. We don't know the severity of what it is. Now, in terms of what can happen if they need to replace a match, in terms of Stephanie Vakor, Io Sky, I mean, certainly to your point, it looks like we could be getting an Io Asuka clash,
Mhm.
which, I mean, sign me up. That's kind of dream match waiting to happen. Um, you could make a case for a Stephanie Vakor versus Rhea Ripley kind of
Mm.
situation in Paris and call that a number one contender kind of match if you wanted to. I think there are definitely ways to work around whatever is going on with Naomi as they did last night without making it look super crazy or just basically thrown together. So again, a lot of it's going to depend on what's happening with Naomi, but if Naomi is unable to make Paris, I don't think it's something that should cause her to be stripped of the championship unless they know that whatever the issue is going to cause her to be out for several months. If that's the case, then they're going to have to do what they have to do.
Oof. And that feels very, very difficult. I mean, if it gets to that, of course, and she's stripped, as you said, it's happened to her the first time she won the championship. For her to be in the position that she is with the momentum, the leverage, her character, all the rest of it, it would be so sad if this is the way that she loses her championship.
Mhm.
It would be difficult to find any kind of replacement match. And I think it would be difficult for Stephanie as well if she
Mhm.
ended up in a number one contenders match because she's already, proven and earned the match
Mhm.
that she's expected to have in Paris. As you said, I mean, there is another 2 weeks or so before the match. There's a lot of time, but it just feels very weird that the announcements that happened yesterday and there's no clarity and there's no specifics and all the rest of it. It just feels very weird as to what the issue actually is.
Something as we're talking, I've just been thinking to, okay, when's the last time we actually saw Naomi in a match?
Mm.
And as I think about it, it may have been Evolution. I'm trying to think if there was one other match with her after Evolution. But if you'll
SummerSlam.
SummerSlam, that's right, that's right. So following SummerSlam, we've not
Mm.
seen her in a match. Everything's just either been backstage or,
True.
that type of thing. So there could have been something there that they were working around and just keeping it in kind of a, okay, we keep her on camera to work through whatever it is. And now we get to this point where we have a match and perhaps they thought it would be good by then and it's
Yeah.
not. Now, here's, I think, what is always telling. If a champion or someone else has had an injury that they know is going to keep them out, they take the title off of them quickly.
Hmm.
We can go back to what happened with Rhea Ripley last year, coming out of WrestleMania and then messing up her elbow or shoulder or whatever it was. And literally the next week, she came out to relinquish the title. So if they know it's going to be a lengthy kind of thing, they'll let you know. With Liv, in the tag title situation that just happened, same thing happened. So I think to a degree, we can feel a little easier about the fact that they haven't had Naomi come out yet to relinquish the championship just because she's not currently medically cleared. So we just kind of have to wait on this one and again try to take our context clues from what we have seen and what we haven't seen. She made it through SummerSlam, did incredibly well. We have not seen her wrestle since SummerSlam, which is okay because it's only been a couple of weeks. That makes sense relative to SummerSlam. So yeah, we'll have to see what this looks like. I'm hopeful that it is something small, that it was just, like I said, a stomach ache, flu bug, something along that line, and they're just actually operating with certain precautions, and then she can go ahead and defend whenever it is that she's ready. I mean, we just went through this with Dom, right?
True.
Dominic Mysterio was supposed to have a title match against AJ Styles before SummerSlam, and he was injured, wasn't medically cleared. They didn't take the title off of him. He was able to be cleared in time for SummerSlam. So I think we've got a couple of recent precedences, that can show us perhaps the severity of what's going on. It's not at the Liv Morgan level where they're going ahead and pulling that title off of her. Could be more on a Dom Mysterio level where, okay, it's going to take them several weeks, which means she might be cleared for Paris. She might not. But the fact that they haven't pulled that title from her, hopefully should give us some degree of relief.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. I mean, I've obviously Dom went a whole month or two, with the piece of paper saying he's not medically cleared, and that was a whole storyline and all the rest of it. So yeah, definitely can look at some of the clues and feel a bit of relief or confidence that she's either going to be at Paris, and even if she doesn't, that we should still see Naomi as champion, and she won't have to relinquish the championship. There are so many other things that happened as well in the last week, especially on SmackDown. SmackDown, in the very weird way, kind of felt like we were on an episode of Back to the Future, because there was a few things that happened. We haven't seen R-Truth in a while. We hadn't seen Carmelo Hayes in a while, but yet when we see them on SmackDown on Friday, both of them have almost gone back to where they were 2 or 3 months ago. So obviously, we know John Cena's done the whole, back to being a face and the hero of the company, all that kind of stuff. He had a very interesting backstage interaction with R-Truth. They did this whole thing. R-Truth was like, "Oh, so you're back. That means I'm back." Blah blah blah. What are your thoughts on the whole thing? Because we had this whole thing of R-Truth coming back, Ron Killings being a little bit, aggressive and deranged and whatnot. Now it seems to be fun-loving, comedic R-Truth again. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that it's very interesting how the entire plane of WWE seemingly gets reset with all things John Cena, right? So John Cena as a heel, okay, well, now we have boom, 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 these particular pieces happening. John Cena, which again, many could make an argument about the way that this change was done.
Yep.
Literally, if you missed the episode of SmackDown, you missed it. It's created moments. I do think, though, that it's wild how that now impacts R-Truth. Because interestingly enough, the heel turn impacted R-Truth.
Yep.
And now we have this space impacting R-Truth. I think there's a couple of ways you could look at it. On one end, to have this kind of reunion between Cena and R-Truth backstage is cool. However, I think it would have been equally powerful, just as you had R-Truth trying to be the one to talk sense into John Cena. It would have been a great moment to have John Cena attempt to talk sense into R-Truth. So look at the fact that the last match we saw with R-Truth, he beat Aleister Black, which there are still aren't enough people talking about. He beats Aleister Black clean. Shouldn't this man be in the ring going off, going crazy? And now John Cena comes out to try to talk sense into him in the middle of the ring. Maybe it results in a match of some sort. And, they then figure out how to work it out from there. But again, it was very odd to see, oh, okay, this changes. And there's no explanation behind it. So I have a lot of questions. I mean, one of the big questions is, so why did he cut his hair and go this whole route of, the truth has set me free and Ron Killing, and it's like there's been no mention of the name Ron Killings ever since
Mm-hmm.
then. And, we get this moment with Aleister Black. That leads to Aleister Black and Damian Priest, which is cool. But then it's like truth is just out here right now. I'll be careful when I say this, but we all wanted our truth to get a contract because he certainly deserved to be in WWE. It wasn't necessarily for him to come back and still do the same things that he was doing before, particularly when he decided, hey, I'm driving now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, let's see where we're going. I don't know. I'm careful to pass judgment too soon, but it just seems like the R-Truth to Ron Killings experiment and the John Cena experiment all kind of ended the same way. And it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense considering where it all could have gone.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's the problem with this whole thing. I mean, the backstage interaction kind of just felt kind of, you know, one and done, very quickly just happened, and we get no real explanation, no backstory, no nothing. But it does make sense that, while R-Truth, the heel turn and the match that he had with Cena was based on Cena's heel turn, that whatever Cena does impacts Truth. You can make sense of that. But I think there's a major missed opportunity with just Truth himself. Take away the John Cena stuff. Just Truth himself, then coming out as Ron Killings, as you said, defeats Aleister Black clean. We didn't see, anything more of him. And I just don't get why. It makes me question why they brought him back.
Hmm.
So yes, they had the reason to get rid of him, and I don't question that, of course. And it's a great thing that they brought him back. But if you're going to do that without any real, if you're going to go that far to bring in someone back without any real plan, or not following it up, or even if there was a plan and it didn't work out the way they wanted it to, surely you can still find a way to keep things going in some way. I just feel as though there's a massive opportunity missed here. Yes, we all love the fun-loving R-Truth, and that's why we love him. But it was so great to see a different side of him, and I thought that would lead to bigger things. Bigger things, not necessarily him having a championship,
Yeah.
or anything like that, or going that far, but at the same time, still giving us a new character, new stories, new matches, all that kind of thing. But yeah, it's upsetting that it's happened the way that it has, and it's crazy. It is actually crazy that his whole existence is only simply based on Cena.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the unfortunate part.
Mm-hmm.
The other unfortunate bit is Carmelo Hayes. What is that about? So obviously Carmelo Hayes was backstage. The Miz has come back. Obviously he's done his American Gladiator presenting stuff, and I think that's been taped and whatnot. So the Miz is back in WWE. Lo and behold, he somehow in 2 minutes convinces Carmelo Hayes that he's still here for him and all the rest of it. What was that like, watching Carmelo interact with Miz? And what are your thoughts for the future of Carmelo, or the immediate future of Carmelo with the Miz?
My hope is that Carmelo Hayes is pulling the wool over Miz's eyes. And he just went on and said, okay, cool, and accepted it with the intent of perhaps if they lose this tag team match they're going to have, he turns on Miz, and we now get a Carmelo Hayes Miz kind of feud with Miz actually being somewhat the good guy. My thought is, with Miz now hosting, American Gladiators and things like that, that probably would suit him better to be a good guy. And be able to do that kind of work. So hopefully all of this is leading to something happening with Carmelo Hayes. It is still hard to try to make heads or tails of the trajectory of Carmelo Hayes. It seems as though his best moment on the main roster was the night he was drafted. With the second best moment arguably either the win over Randy Orton or his subsequent feud that would end up happening with Andrade, the best of 7 series. We haven't seen him cook really since then. And that's been well over a year. Andrade ends up in a tag team now with Rey Fenix. They end up in, of course, the TLC match at SummerSlam. And we don't see or hear anything from Carmelo Hayes. So my hope is that this moment turns into Carmelo Hayes turning on The Miz. Um, I don't think we need Carmelo Hayes as the good guy in this. I think Carmelo Hayes needs to really be able to be that, tough, nasty guy. And maybe he needs backup.
Mm.
Maybe he needs backup from somebody. I don't know who. I don't think it's Trick Williams, because I think Trick Williams is his own star right now, and he doesn't need to return to, backing somebody up. So we need to find some help for Carmelo Hayes and let Carmelo Hayes really cook like we know he can.
And that's interesting because there was a picture that came out, it was about a month ago now, maybe. And we've never spoken about it on this show.
Yeah.
And sometimes we see pictures and it gets us excited, and sometimes we know it's not really meant to be anything. But the interesting thing is the picture was of R-Truth, Carmelo Hayes, and the Street Profits.
Yes.
We've mentioned the Street Profits a number of times, not knowing what they're going to do and what they're doing with them and all that kind of thing. And R-Truth and Carmelo kind of fall into that very similar category, where WWE seem to just not know exactly what they're doing with them. This picture comes out and everyone gets excited, thinking, "Oh,
Yeah.
imagine them as a faction,
Yeah.
or as a group, or whatever." With what happened on SmackDown, I'm now like, okay, so that's not going to happen because everyone's gone back to being what they are. But with Carmelo now, and The Miz, I'm hoping it is definitely something where Carmelo turns on The Miz in some way, or gets annoyed or gets frustrated at some point, and then we get a feud between them. It maybe then means that we see Carmelo on our TV screens a lot more often than we have over the last maybe 3 or 4 weeks. But yeah, it's we're in this place where we still don't know what we're doing with Carmelo, and again, his existence in WWE is based on someone else. Because after he won the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, he had the chain with the big Andre. When Miz was gone, that chain disappeared as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as cheesy as it kind of was, I was like, okay, this is something to run with. When it disappeared, I'm like, why did we get rid of it? Let him keep running with it. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, I'm hoping we get the cocky, we continue to get the cocky Carmelo Hayes, and then he gets some kind of win over the Miz, and we continue to see something. But it was just questionable in terms of the interaction between him and the Miz backstage on SmackDown. But we'll see what happens.
I don't know that the thought of that picture is necessarily out of the question. I think there are ways to get to that, because if you look at all of them, there's this equal frustration that they each have. They each are being underutilized, and it's somewhat clear that they recognize it, but it's kind of hiding in the shadows. So it actually kind of reminds me of the formation of the New Day. 3 guys who at the time were not really moving in the ways that they could have. They kind of came together as a last-ditch effort, and their efforts specifically has turned it into something where we're still seeing New Day, 10, 11 years later. So I think it's not necessarily impossible. It'll take us a little bit of time to get there. But I mean, it could start as simple as, perhaps either Carmelo losing, or something happens where R-Truth kind of snaps again, and there are people that are coming out trying to do some things with him, and then here comes Carmelo, and then here comes the Street Profits, and before you know it, they're all standing tall, and we're going, whoa, we didn't see that coming, but yeah, these guys are coming together. So I'm not going to completely rule that out just yet. I think one of the things WWE has been doing a good job of is they'll tease something, then they'll let it go away for a while, and you've almost forgotten about it, and then it comes back, and you're like, wow.
Mm.
So my hope is that perhaps was a tease, or at least somebody somewhere can, pitch a case for it, because I think all four of them would win by having that level of star power and momentum together.
And I think the beauty of that picture or those four guys being together, it is like it would be the typical structure of a faction.
Yes.
Truth
Yes.
being the older experienced guy,
Hmm.
Montez and Angelo Dawkins again, kind of in the middle, being you know experienced, but at the same time still waiting for their real break, being
Yeah.
frustrated about being underutilized or passed over so many times. And then, of course, the cocky up and coming guy, the big loudmouth in Carmelo Hayes. So
Hmm.
it is actually a perfect type of faction.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for me, I wouldn't rule it out completely, but at the same
Hmm.
time, with the way the WWE has been, I try not to get too confident about something unless I've seen it happen on
Yeah.
TV, or
I get that.
clear signs at least
Hmm.
on TV, and we haven't had that as of yet. But it's not impossible. But we'll wait and see what happens.
Yeah.
Um, Speaking of Carmelo Hayes, and you mentioned Trick Williams as well. It's interesting. I think Trick Williams had an interview, or an interview was put out that he had. I think just yesterday, if not this morning, where he was asked about Joe Hendry and Randy Orton at WrestleMania,
Hmm.
and he said that he believes that Joe Hendry took that spot from him.
Hmm.
Very, very interesting. And he went on to say that, imagine me and Randy Orton in a match, two of us alpha males, great physically, all that kind of thing. But you've put Joe Hendry in there, who is, what did he say? He's just a believer. He believes he's good enough, but Trick Williams knows that he's good enough.
Hmm.
Do you think it would have been any different if it was Trick Williams as opposed to Joe Hendry that faced Randy Orton at WrestleMania?
I think the result would have been the same,
Hmm.
in terms of Randy Orton winning, but I think in terms of, the result wasn't really what people paid attention to. It was the rub. And
Mm.
I think in terms of a moment, yes, we would love a Trick Williams WrestleMania kind of entrance with, 60,000 people screaming, "Whoop that trick." Like that's a thing.
Game changer.
That's a thing. But I think in this moment, it was the right time for Joe Hendry for a few reasons. At this point, Joe Hendry is the TNA World Champion. So
Hmm.
you've got history that's being made there.
True.
Plus, you have a Joe Hendry who is way over. Like you're talking about, obviously TNA, but worldwide, from NXT and all around the wrestling world, they know who Joe Hendry is. And so when that Say His Name hit, the whole place went crazy,
Yep.
you know? So you're looking at, again, the historic nature of Joe Hendry being the TNA World Champion. First time the TNA World title has been on a WrestleMania stage. Um, Joe Hendry had a great showing. And here's the question: who kind of needed it more? I think Joe Hendry needed it more than Trick Williams. Trick Williams already has this system that is building him. And wildly enough, for whatever people had thought about Trick Williams' wrestling and in ring ability, this year has proven to be the best year for Trick Williams.
Yep.
Again, as we said here on the show, him becoming the TNA World Champion was going to improve him significantly in ring, and it has.
Hmm.
So that has worked. He has continued to fully lean into his star power. The machine's already working for him. He's going to have a WrestleMania moment, whether it's next year, the year after, it won't be too long. I
Hmm.
don't know how many more Joe Hendry has in this particular space. So I think Joe Hendry needed it more. it was going to be more of a talking point if Joe Hendry had it. Trick Williams obviously took the world title from him a couple of months later. So, and they had a thing about it, at the NXT following WrestleMania. So they capitalized on that. But I do think WWE made the right move with it being Joe Hendry for this year. Next year, much different conversation.
Oh, for sure. And I agree completely as well, in the sense that it definitely should have been, it definitely fit for it to be Joe Hendry over
Yes.
Trick Williams. And that's also a thing where it was at that point as well. If it was a Trick Williams now, there's no argument.
Right.
With the way Trick Williams has been since he's won that TNA championship, the defenses that he's had, the star power, his mic skills, his in-ring ability has improved a little bit. All of those things, looking at it now, no problem. But then I don't think, and as much as, we were all kind of trying to work out who it might be or who it could be, Trick Williams' name was in there. But I think it was a much bigger surprise that it was Joe Hendry, because that name wasn't mentioned.
Nope.
And like you said, he had the TNA World Championship. He was, he's a massive name. It was a massive surprise, and that is what was needed during that. It was a whole thing about just creating a moment for someone.
Yeah.
As you said, the result would have been exactly the same. It was going to be Randy Orton winning, but the moment was going to be the surprise of who's coming out, and Joe Hendry was definitely the bigger one. But a Trick Williams now showing up,
that
would have been great. That would have been great. But Trick Williams also now, as we said, he is the TNA World Champion. He's set to defend against Moose. Do we see any kind of change in the landscape of TNA after this match?
No. I think, they're lining up these opponents for Trick Williams to, again, build who he is. Trick Williams defeating Moose is arguably the biggest win of his career. When you're dealing with someone the tenure of Moose, multiple time world champion, the guy who's had TNA on his back, certainly for the last few years, think about what that did, I think, for Obafemi. Obafemi was certainly significant, but that was the dream match we wanted to see. And I don't know that most thought that Obafemi would win that match. Trick versus Moose, I think, is a huge match. I think Trick, at the very least, gets to Bound for Glory still as the TNA World Champion. And I think it's there where we might finally see him lose the title to Mike Santana. But I think right now, oh no, he's crushing it. I think the other thing that's going to determine that, as much as they want Mike Santana to be, the TNA World Champion, they are doing some really good numbers with Trick Williams. The sellout that happened in New York City, their largest North American audience in 10 years or whatever the number was. Like, you cannot deny that being connected to Trick Williams. Definitely connected to him. So if they continue to see this rise, and there's this, talk right now about a new TV deal for TNA, man, listen, Trick Williams can then say, I led NXT to the CW, and I led TNA to whatever this deal's going to be. Wow. They're not taking that. Then in that case, oh no, he remains champion at Bound for Glory. And, he might go into 2026 as a TNA World Champion. You have to strike while the iron is hot. And while many thought Mike Santana was a great move for New York, seeing all that Trick Williams has done for the TNA brand, oh no, that's major. It's major. So he'll beat Moose this weekend. And I think I'm telling you, they land this major TV deal, and I've heard of a couple of places that they're shopping, it's going to be the biggest TV deal in TNA history. I say that very, very easily, understanding what TNA's TV history has been. So if that happens with Trick Williams as your world champion, again, his ability to say, I led, and here's the thing, if they don't capitalize on that on TV, they're missing the boat. As soon as TNA signs this deal, Trick Williams needs to go on NXT and say, I led NXT to the CW. In a year, I then led TNA to wherever, right? I'm two brand Trick or whatever he comes up with, right? Like, run, and I mean, run that on TNA like crazy. Take advantage of both of those moments, and you can't argue with that. He's a needle mover.
Yeah,
Trick
yeah.
Williams.
And beating Moose, as you said, I think that's a bigger win for him than it was when he beating Joe Hendry.
Absolutely.
As much as that match meant he
Absolutely.
wins the title, but when you look at Joe Hendry compared to Moose in TNA, Joe Hendry, yes, big star at the time and all the rest of it, but he's not been there that long. Moose has been carrying the company for how long? He's the franchise of the company, as he always says himself, but no one can deny him of that either. So imagine now Trick beats Moose. Trick's the franchise. And with all the stuff that you just said about them getting a new TV deal, CW is a possibility as well. It's as well for TNA.
Which would be wild. Oh Lord,
exactly. and then Trick being the face of the CW of NXT moving to the CW, he would be undeniable. Yeah. He would be undeniable, and I'm glad that you came. That you mentioned all of that, because that's something as well that people seem to overlook or don't remember, is that this guy has been the face of NXT in spaces that NXT haven't been before.
Correct.
Now for him to be that face for TNA where they haven't been before, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So when people are begging or saying, "Oh, we should be on the main roster," and he's done so and so, let's not rush this thing.
Right.
Let him cook where he is. And then by the time he is ready to go to the main roster, it will be undeniable. I mean, he'll have so much to back him to back himself up with. And when he comes onto Raw, SmackDown, give him everything. You know what I mean? I'm not saying give him the world championship necessarily, but at the same time, you've got to make sure he's there all the time on the mic, big matches, big feuds, all of that. But with where Trick Williams is right now, it's crazy to think that, we mentioned Carmelo. He was Carmelo's sidekick. Now look at him compared to.
Yeah, I was going to say, who would have imagined that Trick Williams would be a bigger star than Carmelo Hayes?
DDP did.
He sure did. No, you're, and he said it right here on this show.
Exactly.
He said it right here on this show. Exactly. And so I think that's why you let him cook. I think we have to also consider, there are so many places that Trick Williams can go outside of Raw and SmackDown and still very much be considered a star. What he's doing right now in TNA is significant. Don't let him mess around and go to AAA. Right? Like, you got all of these opportunities that are available. So you then make him an international star. Oh my gosh, the things that have potential to happen for Trick Williams, I think, are very, very big. And so, no, let's not rush Raw or SmackDown right now, because I think, the problem that you have on both Raw and SmackDown is you have mega stars. And so there's a lot of people fighting for that real estate. You still have John Cena floating in there, and now Cena beloved, and everybody's wanting to pay attention. So there's a fight for who's the biggest face in the company right now. Is it Cena? Is it Cody Rhodes? Is it Jey Uso? Is it Roman Reigns? Right? 4 massive names. You throw CM Punk in there. You throw LA Knight in there. You got Seth Rollins. You got Dominic doing crazy things. So it's already flooded and packed. You don't need to add any more to that so that someone kind of falls in that mid space that they don't need to be in. So let Trick cook in TNA, in NXT, both of which are doing extremely well. And let's see how far that goes.
Exactly. And I think the beauty of where Trick is right now is, we're seeing it on NXT as well as TNA, because he is, trying to face up to Obafemi with the idea of holding both the NXT and TNA championships. But for me, I feel his involvement in that is mainly to do with pushing Javon Evans. to
Yes.
being a bigger star, even more than
Yes.
he already is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've seen their interaction on Tuesday last week
Mm-hmm.
with Moose coming in as well, and then we're gonna get this number one contenders match to determine who's gonna face Obafemi for the NXT Championship.
Right.
How do you see that one transpiring?
That one's interesting. Because I don't know if we necessarily need Oba versus Trick again. We've seen that before. We also don't necessarily need a double champion. I think that the multiple championship belts thing is already overdone. There are too many people already in AEW with that. I think JC Jane holding that right now. I get it. We don't need two of those. So I think this does need to go the route of Javon Evans. And I think you could make the argument that Moose comes out and costs Trick Williams that match tonight. And that leads, of course, to their big match coming up later this week. But I think it's Javon Evans' time. And he's been hovering around the championship picture for quite some time. He's been getting title shots for certainly over a year. If you go back to, I'm trying to think, I think it was 23 when Ethan Page first became the NXT champion. That happened in a four-way that involved Javon Evans, the summer of 2023. So we're now looking at the fact that it's been 2 years and he's been getting all of these unique moments and shots at the title, including main eventing, stand and deliver. And he's been doing just that, standing and delivering outstanding matches. To me, I think it's poetic justice that Javon Evans is the guy to beat Obafemi for the NXT championship. It would just be right. How it happens, we end up watching, but I think it would just be right. So I think Javon Evans walks out tonight as the number one contender and then goes to Heat Wave to get that title shot.
So tonight is actually even more interesting because it's actually the four guys against Dark State. Because remember,
That's
Dark
right.
State
That's in 2 weeks in
attacked
Philly.
them as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. That's next week in Philly.
That match is going to be very interesting.
Yes, it will.
The beautiful thing about last week was seeing the four guys in the ring, the biggest players in both NXT, TNA, four black men
Yes.
standing there strong, undeniable as the top guys within those two companies.
Yes.
Then Dark State come out, of course, three of the four of them, again, black men. We're going to get this big, massive 8-man tag. And I believe what you said about Moose possibly costing Trick, I think we're going to see something very similar in this match as well.
Yeah.
Neither of them like each other. There's no friends within this four at all. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, in 2 weeks' time, when we get Javon versus Trick, then we'll definitely see Moose costing, Trick in some way, or someone else. Someone else could cost Trick. But I also definitely strongly believe that Javon is set to beat Obafemi for the championship.
I would love that.
Visually, it doesn't make sense. Visually, nobody makes sense in beating Obafemi, possibly Moose, but that's about it.
Yeah.
But in terms of momentum, in terms of where people are, wins and losses and all that kind of stuff over the last maybe 6 months, Javon is probably the only person that makes any type of sense in beating Obafemi. And I feel as though it might be time for some kind of change. Because it just feels as though Obafemi is, as much as he's undeniable and dominant, it just feels a bit stagnant now.
Because he's too dominant.
Exactly.
The thing that makes this work is there has to feel like there is a threat to your championship. And nobody that they have put him up against has been able to have that kind of threatening effect where you think that the only one that came close was Jasper Troy.
Yep.
That's the only one. Everybody else, they had to bow to the ruler. So the idea that we don't have somebody. I think it, and you could make this argument, as dominant as Obafemi is, people would flock to see Javon Evans as a champion because it looks like every week he could lose because of his size.
Yep.
So, seeing the David of all of this kind of find a way to, get his smooth stone and win versus the clear Goliath who you expect to win, that's the kind of thing that gets ratings, that makes people excited. Sure, we love to see Oba. Don't get me wrong, but I think Oba would do, obviously, we've been talking about him being ready for Raw or SmackDown, but you put an Oba, in there chasing Cody. Oh, we got something now, because that'd be a thing. That would be a thing. So I think, we're in a space where Oba's gone through just about everybody. There isn't anybody else for him to really go through. I mean, I don't know if we want to see a Ricky Saints versus Oba situation. I still think Oba would win that.
Yep.
But I think there's something about Javon that gives me David versus Goliath, with David actually winning the NXT championship.
And this is the thing, we've seen it countless times in WWE, and that's the beauty of pro wrestling as well.
Yeah,
we've seen it countless times where we've seen the David beat the Goliath. Talk about when Seth Rollins versus Brock Lesnar. We've seen Shawn Michaels basically his whole career, especially when he was on top. We've seen Rey Mysterio do it a number of times. So to see and expect Javon Evans beating Obafemi for the championship would be perfect. And the level of, how over he is with the fans, the level of matches that he has. We've never even said how great the match between him and Wes Lee was a few weeks ago. Phenomenal match. And what else is very interesting is every time Javon has come up against Obafemi, whether that be in a match or just in the ring and there's been a confrontation, Javon Evans has come out on top.
Yes.
And as much as he didn't win the match at Stand and Deliver, but he was the one that gave Obafemi the most problems. So it makes it's easy to make sense of Javon beating Obafemi and becoming the champion. And I think, as I said, I think it's needed for the championship to change hands, and the only person that is there that feels believable and makes sense is Javon Evans. No one else works. You mentioned Ricky Saints. He's having this whole feud with Jasper Troy. I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but what do you feel is like the position of Ricky Saints right now? It kind of feels a bit confusing.
It does. I mean, he came in with an amazing debut. Like literally, he was a day or two fresh off of the free agent market, and then boom, he just shows up. And we're excited. He ends up winning an NXT North American Championship before we get to Stand and Deliver. Like, he's on the road, he's crushing it, he's killing it, and then to our shock, he loses the NXT North American Championship. And if we're honest, he hasn't been the same since.
No.
So it's making me wonder what's happening. Is there physically something going on? Is he, just not sure of what he needs at this particular point? I'm not sure. I'm interested in this situation with Jasper Troy because I feel like it's a scenario where both of them need to win and neither of them can afford to lose. I think if we keep piling losses onto Jasper Troy, he looks like the monster who is beatable.
Yeah.
And a beatable monster is not what we're looking for. We're looking for the unbeatable monster. If Ricky Saints loses to this relative rookie, then the question is, okay, well, what's the deal with Ricky Saints? Is it just time to go ahead to Raw or SmackDown and really spend some time there versus continuing to lose in NXT? So I think it's a situation where both need to win, neither can afford to lose. So that's what makes this interesting, right?
For sure. And I think ultimately, Jasper Troy can afford to lose a little bit more than Saints. But You're right though, in terms of if it then becomes a thing where he's consistently losing, it's not going to look great for him.
No.
Luckily, it's very, very early in his career, and
Right.
that's the only thing that helps.
Hmm.
But with Saints, if he then loses to Jasper Troy, that's not going to be a good look at all. You know what I
It's
mean?
not.
It's not going to be a good look whatsoever. I mean, they're in a position where they could have a thing where Saints beats him this time around, and then it's 1 against 1, and then we get a rubber match at
Right.
some point. At least
Right.
we're longing out the feud. It gives them both something to do, be on our TVs more often, all the rest of it. But yeah, it's a funny situation. Like looking at how Ricky Saints is, his position in the company, or the rest of it at the moment. It just so many questions come from it. But I do want to see something happen for Saints. And if he beats Troy, hopefully maybe moves on to something else after that. I don't think personally, as good as he is, but in terms of the way he's been used and booked, I don't think a move to the main roster makes sense.
Okay.
I don't think a
Okay.
move to the main roster makes sense. I think he just needs a few more reps in NXT, maybe win another championship, or have a big major feud and win that, possibly
Okay.
then go. Because I'm thinking, where do you put him? You know what I mean? Where do you put him?
I think there's one of two places. I mean, there's certainly, I see him easily on Raw fighting for the Intercontinental Championship. Him and Dominic Mysterio could cook.
Oh, that could be good.
That could really, really cook. The alternative, of course, is to send him over to SmackDown, and him and Solo would make for a very interesting match, I think, for the U.S. Championship. I don't know if they want to get him on the same space where Cody is, knowing their relationship. That could be interesting. Again, him being on Raw and his connection to CM Punk, that could work as well. So I think there's some real possibilities for him on Raw or SmackDown. And arguably, he could show up today and be a significant star. And again, make his claim on the Intercontinental Championship against Dominic Mysterio, or if AJ were to win it against AJ. I think him being in that space, though, is what would work well for him right now. I don't think we need to put him in a space with a Jey Uso or those guys, because just from a popularity perspective, it'd be asking the people too much. But to get them behind him in that mid-card space, I think that's a win.
Yeah, true. I think it could work, and as you said, the relationships with Cody, CM Punk, especially having that option on two separate brands as well,
Right.
fits perfectly for him. That mid card space would be absolutely perfect as well. As you said, it helps create his star power on either one of those shows, so it could work. But I just feel as though, because of where he's at in NXT in this kind of confusing space, and with the way that he lost to Ethan Page and never really kind of got back to that, it just feels a bit weird as to what's happening with him at the moment as well. One unfortunate thing that did happen that was announced a couple of days ago was Ashante THEE Adonis. His contract with WWE has now expired. He is done with the company. His contract wasn't renewed. He wasn't released, but they decided not to renew his contract. What do you make of Ashante's time in WWE as a whole?
He was certainly a strong prospect on the indies before he made his way to WWE. As I think back to his time, I mean, this kind of tells you how long he was there. He was part of Hit Row, so it was like, wow, when you think about that Hit Row era, you're talking about when Swerve was there. You're talking about when AJ Francis was there. And so, he ended up, so that took him through, again, kind of the end of Black and Gold NXT, put him on SmackDown very briefly, and then, of course, getting him back over to NXT. I do think that the last NXT run was starting to look promising. The whole thing of him being kind of the ladies' man, the moment he had with Carmen Petrovich, like that was cool, but he never really got to ascend past there. So I don't know that we really got to see fully what he could bring to the table. I think anytime you spent time in WWE, it puts you in a great space when you head back to the Indies or wherever you're going to go, because that WWE affiliation always takes you far. So I don't know what his plans will be going forward. I don't think we saw the best of him. So
Mm.
my hope is that, he gets a run somewhere else, whether it is in AEW, whether it is ironically in TNA, which he could still do. If it's in New Japan or even in the Indies, I hope he gets a run somewhere that really gets to showcase what his abilities really are, because I don't think we got to fully see them in WWE during his time there.
Oh, for sure. The fact that his contract ended and he wasn't released also means, of course, there's no complete clause
Right.
at all. He
Right.
could show up anywhere today, and
Hmm.
wrestle for someone else, sign a new contract in another company.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, he came into WWE as part of Hit Row. That's when we first really saw him, alongside AJ Francis. Of course,
Hmm.
AJ Francis is doing great things now in TNA.
Yeah.
Of course, with First Class. And when Ashante posted that he's no longer with WWE, of course, AJ Francis was very quick to, make mention of it. I could see him with First Class for sure.
Sure.
I think
Sure.
that would be a great move for him. And almost in,
Hmm.
in, in a funny way, I would not be completely surprised if there was some kind of conversation with him and NXT to where they will say, they probably even said, we're not going to read your contract, but there's a chance for you to go to TNA. That's a
Hmm.
possibility. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think that would be great. We've already seen Jakara Jackson's made the move
Yes.
and signed
Yes.
a new contract. She's now in TNA. She
Hmm.
turned up in TNA as Jakara Jackson. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's possible, and I think that would be a great move for him. I think a
Hmm.
good run on the Indies for a bit, maybe, but he can still do
Yeah.
both.
Yeah. You
So,
could.
and I feel as though his time in NXT, we didn't see his full potential. We saw
Hmm.
sparks of it, very similar
Yeah.
to our Mensa. We saw
Hmm.
sparks of different
Hmm.
things and whatnot, but they never really capitalized on it. Do you think with that type of those types of guys, to where you see sparks and we've seen like little storylines and all that kind of thing, but it never really turned into much afterwards? Do you think that's something of that person's capabilities, or possibly just them being around at maybe like the wrong time, in the sense of there were other things going on, bigger stars maybe, and they just couldn't fit them in? Like, what do you think that happens in that way?
I think that's difficult to answer, and here's why. I think there are multiple things that could be at play here. One of the things that people don't understand is when you come from the indies specifically to WWE, where that is different than TNA and AEW, is that there's a way that WWE does television that is far different than any other company. So if you are in an indie space, and you are accustomed to, you know, having certain kinds of matches, not having to do weekly television, all of those kinds of moments, and then you come into a system like WWE, sometimes it's not an issue of skill set as much as it is system.
Mm,
It's a system that may not work well for him. And so it's interesting because as I think about, I mentioned Hit Row, you
hmm
know, everybody who's with Hit Row that's not in WWE are all doing well.
hmm
You know, AJ Francis has done incredibly well.
hmm
Swerve is doing incredibly well. So sometimes it is an issue of the system, and the system not necessarily working well for that particular wrestler.
mm,
I don't know. It's hard to say where the strengths of Ashante the Adonis lied. Did the strengths lie in ring work? Did the strength lie in his promo ability? We got to hear him talk a little bit when he was doing the whole ladies man thing.
hmm
Outside of that, we didn't hear him talk much. So it's hard to say where his strengths end up lying. When you get on the indies, obviously there's less that you have to do in terms of TV. The
Hmm.
TV schedule for TNA obviously is different. The TNA schedule for AEW is different, and how, excuse me, the TV schedule for AEW and how they shoot TV is much different than WWE. So it's really going to be a question. I mean, I mentioned I mentioned Hit Row, but I think about Ricochet, and how incredibly different Ricochet is right now versus what he was doing in WWE. He's doing some of the same moves. In fact, you could make an argument that his move set right now in AEW is more indicative of what you would have expected from him in WWE. It's like
Yeah.
he's kind of calmed it down a bit. He's not doing nearly as many flips. Now, part of the reason for that too is if everybody's flipping, nobody's flipping.
Yeah.
So they already had that. They don't need more of that. But he's
Mm.
found his way to talk. And so I just wonder if this is an issue of systems for Ashante the Adonis. And the only way we're going to find out is to see the new system that he's in and how he adjusts to that.
For sure. As I said, I think I'm quite confident in the way that his career is going to go.
Okay.
The opportunities he's still going to have. And I don't think it matters as who is, a big massive star, but just the simple fact that I can see him still consistently working,
Sure.
doing different things is good enough for me. I'm sure he's not going to just disappear,
Right.
from existence in terms of pro wrestling,
Right.
and that's a great thing. And as I said, the opportunity to end up with first class is there's so many things you could still do on the indies with
Sure.
having the WWE NXT on his resume, all of that
Hmm.
kind of thing. So
Yeah.
we should be okay. And I'm excited to see what he does do.
Yeah.
We've spoken so many times about Cedric Alexander and what he's done in the time since he's been away from
Hmm.
WWE.
Yeah.
I feel as though it could be a very good thing for Ashanti as well.
Hmm.
Um, I was going to talk about as well Lash Legend and Jada Parker.
Yeah.
You tell me, out of those two ladies, who you think should be closer to the opportunity of going for the NXT Women's Championship?
It's a tough one because there's a strong argument for both of them.
Hmm.
A very strong argument for Lash Legend, who, coming off the heels of basically being the runner up in the Evolution Battle Royal,
Hmm.
she showed the world her ability. Now, of course, right now she is kind of locked into a feud with Nia Jax, which I think is telling. You
Yeah.
know, the idea that Nia Jax came to NXT looking for Lash Legend as opposed to Lash going to SmackDown looking for Nia speaks volumes. And I think it speaks to the trajectory that they have Lash Legend on. You have Jada Parker, who has been cooking. She really was cooking more so, I think, end of last year, top of this year,
Yep.
when we got into stand and deliver season, she was definitely cooking. To some degree, it feels like she's cooled off a little bit.
Hmm.
But I think we're in a scenario where you could argue perhaps one of them gets an NXT title shot and the other gets a TNA Knockouts title shot,
Ooh.
considering it's the same person that they're having to
Mm.
fight. I like that idea because I think both of them deserve an opportunity at gold. One of them should take gold because my concern is, we've had Jada Parker around the championship situation for easily 6 months.
Easily, yeah.
And there's not been any kind of trade off with that. I don't want her to lose momentum. I feel like she's had to pick momentum back up. She had the war with Jordan Grace recently, and
Hmm.
now it's like, okay, she's got her eyes firmly set on the championship. Lash Legend, I'm hoping that, again, they haven't missed the time on her. You go back almost 2 years to when she first body slammed Otis, and you
Mm.
go, woo. And so we've had her just kind of hovering. She was in tag team space for a while, doing the whole metaphor thing. And, she didn't get the tag titles, though she's had multiple shots. one of the only NXT talents to make that trip over to Saudi. You know, they trusted her really well, trusted her on SmackDown. So to me, it feels like with both of them, if we don't pull the trigger now, you know, we could miss an opportunity, because both of them seem like it's certainly, I think Lash is probably more ready for the main roster right now than Jada.
Yep.
So again, the time is kind of ticking. You know, if we don't get this strap around Lash Legend soon, then just send her up, because she's a big girl, right? And being that tall, strong girl, she's got opponents. She's got Nia, she's got Piper Niven, you know, but then there's also, again, we talked David and Goliath earlier, you know, putting her in and letting her ragdoll Zelina Vega for a bit, right? Like, you know, just the image of that creates some things for her. Jada is in her own orbit right now. Like, there's nobody like Jada Parker. So again, she has got great opportunities, but I think Jada needs that NXT championship, or at least the North American championship, right? And if you give Lash the opportunity at the NXT championship, we're good. So I think either way, both of them need championship opportunities and championship runs.
I feel as though there's a possibility, in a roundabout way, very indirectly, but that Lash could end up with the North American Championship.
Okay.
Because the altercation that she had with Nia was during you know, the main event where Sol Ruka was defending a North American Championship, of course.
Right.
You know, thankfully it worked out for Sol Ruka, but then because it happened in that space, I'm thinking, are they trying to tell us something here? When she finishes up with Nia Jax, could she go for that North American Championship? And that is whether Sol Ruka has it, or oh God, what's her name? The Australian Sol Ruka's
Daria.
Daria, that's the one.
It is Daria.
No.
Yeah,
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I think about that. Is that right?
I think so.
It feels like it should be different, but we'll get that right.
Zaria.
Somebody's going to correct me soon. Zaria. I said
Zaria.
Daria. I was like, Daria doesn't quite sound right, but Zaria. Yeah.
But yeah, whether Sol Ruka has it or Zaria has it, I think Lash Legend would be a great opponent for either of them. Sol Ruka being obviously a face, very athletic.
Yeah.
But then if it is Zaria, you've got two powerhouses that can face each other. We've seen them kind of, you know, clash before as well. So I think for me, that's where it's going. Yeah. And for me, I think it's a better thing as well, because think about it now. If Jada Parker goes for either one of JC Jane's titles, it's not likely she'll beat her, because it's very early on in her reign, or that kind of thing. It's not likely she'll beat her. If Lash Legend does all this other stuff for a while and then comes for the NXT Women's Championship, it's more likely she'll win. So I think at the minute, if we are comparing the two, and you know, we don't want to do that too much, they are two very different people. But at the same time, if we compare the two, I think Lash Legend's in a better place, and I would rather her go for other things than come back to the NXT Women's Championship. So it's a good place for her. I think both of them are actually still in a good space. Okay. Because even as you mentioned with Jada, she's had to pick her momentum back up again. But the fact that she's back there again is telling. Yeah. Because she could have disappeared, especially in that women's division.
Sure.
She could have disappeared or become an afterthought or whatever else. So, you know, that in itself is also telling. But I think whatever her next opportunity is, if it happens before the end of this year, I don't see it being a win. I don't see it being a win. But then at the same time, it's still possible that in time, maybe sometime next year, it will happen. Possibly. The final thing I want to talk about is a very, very interesting few days. At the start, I think it was like mid last week, where we emerged that MVP had backstage heat in AEW. The story being that, you know, the Hurt Syndicate didn't want to lose their titles to anyone. You know, MVP has a personal issue with Speedball Mike Bailey. And also that, you know, for some reason, it was one of the guys' decisions to get rid of MJF. from the Hurt Syndicate. We've seen that, the Hurt Syndicate or MJF leave the Hurt Syndicate. Okay, cool. We're going to talk about it because I'm a little bit confused as to how and why. But this whole thing with the backstage heat, MVP being the man that he is, being MVP, made sure to let the dirt sheets know that whatever rumors or things that you hear or Chinese whispers, I'm going to make sure you lot know the truth. Because what he then did was just before Wednesday's Dynamite is post a video of him and Speedball Mike Bailey basically making fun of the whole scenario. Mm-hmm. I guess my question to you is, how often do you think it happens to where the dirt sheets maybe create news or misconstrue news or, hear the Chinese whispers and make a certain conclusion? How often do you think that happens?
I think it's more often than not. I think what can happen is, man, whew, okay. So our world right now, when it comes to news, is very clickbait heavy. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, those who are creating accounts ultimately want people to pay attention to what they're doing. So they don't mind clicks and likes and things on wrong information. We have so many stories about this. Go back a couple of years ago when there were rumors about potentially WWE being sold. And literally in one night, somebody put out a fake story that WWE was going to be sold to the Saudis. Mm-hmm. And it sent the whole wrestling world crazy, including people inside WWE who were just like, oh my God, what is going on, et cetera, only for it to be completely false. There are more stories that are often wrong than right. I've often sat back and wondered, okay, so who is the source, right? Who's the person inside WWE, inside AEW, whomever, that is going to these sources and leaking this information such that, okay, now it's got to come out? That's disturbing to me. And I don't know who it is. And I don't know, I don't know how much money they're potentially getting paid or what the payoff is. But the reason that it works is because consumers are so hungry for what they deem to be inside information that they'll take it from anywhere. They won't even look at the source. Like there are times where stories would come out and people forget, oh, snap, it's April 1st. Oh, April Fool's Day. Probably not a true story, right? They don't check the account to see, is this a credible account? And then what doesn't help is many news reporters will just repost what somebody else stated.
Right.
So again, there's no verification on the authenticity of the story or not. So in the wrestling world, it's so easy to pass over misinformation. It is so easy to do because nobody's checking the validity of it. And then you have people like a Dave Meltzer, who's supposed to be deemed, kind of an authority, who still gets it wrong. Mm-hmm. So I think this is where, as journalists and content creators, we have a responsibility to actually vet this information. And if you don't have a source with which you vet it, then don't talk about it. Equally, as fans and consumers, we need to stop being so enamored by behind the scenes that we'll just believe anything. I mean, because these wrestlers can easily debunk this. And so many times, like last week was a perfect example. Somebody put out a story that Karrion Kross and Scarlett had reached a new contract with WWE. And Karrion Kross has to get on somebody's podcast and go, hey guys, sorry, that's not true. People are like, what do I believe? What don't I believe? Then when you see them move to the alumni spot in WWE's website, you go, oh, I guess that story wasn't. So it just goes to show how quickly somebody can create a story and people just run with it. So At some point, we'll find out perhaps what the authenticity of whether or not that story is true with the Hurt Business and with MVP, et cetera, et cetera. We don't know. I don't know if we'll have a way of knowing. I mean, my goodness, it took 3 years for Cody to finally say, hey, you know what? There really were issues with me in AEW, right? He held
Mhm.
that for 3 whole years, until he felt comfortable enough to say something. We still don't know what actually happened in terms of why Mercedes and Naomi left the WWE 3 years ago. We still don't know. They still haven't talked about it. So I think we have to get to a place where until we hear it from a credible source, then we just consider it to be rumor,
Mm.
or don't build a whole case around it. Because other than that, then we have to come back and issue apologies when we realize we got it wrong.
The other thing that has happened, and we've seen it play out on TV, is MJF no longer with the Hurt Syndicate. MVP spoke to him, and it was nice in the way that it was done. In
Mm-hmm.
the sense where MVP just had a quiet word with him in the corner, literally
Yeah.
in the corner of the room,
Yeah.
and was like, the boys feel as though every time you're with us, it's just about you, I, and so you've got to go. Or we're not with you anymore. We're not behind you. Thumbs down, as MVP did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my question is like, does it feel as though that whole thing was then a waste of time? Will we get some kind of friction at some point? We kind of revisit this whole thing with MVP, with MJF and Bobby Lashley, who was usually like the main antagonist or the guy that wasn't really behind MJF in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
What is this?
Yeah, you were the one who said that it was either you or Mex who said that we don't have an AEW problem or a WWE problem. We have wrestling problems,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
This is literally what we just saw last week with John Cena.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally, somebody somewhere said we need to change course, so they take 1 week, switch it
Mm-hmm.
up. They took, in this case, 2 weeks with MJF. They have him have an argument with Lashley. Lashley gets tired of him. Lashley gives him the thumbs down. Then last week, we get MVP going, you know what? We've had enough. We're done. Somebody somewhere said it's time to change course. Now, I don't know if it's because however they planned to wrap it up wasn't going to work. I mean, if we think about it, how could it have ended in a way that would have made sense to us? It probably would have had to be MJF going after the world championship
Mm-hmm.
and either winning it or getting close to winning it. And it goes one of two ways. It's either the Hurt Business, or excuse me, Hurt Syndicate helps MJF win the world title, and then he acts like he did it himself, and they go, okay, we're tired of this, and they turn on him that way. Or it's Bobby Lashley realizing, wait a minute, why am I being relegated to being a tag team champion when I'm a former multiple time world champion? With MJF cashing in his, golden ticket, he gets the opportunity, and then it's Bobby Lashley who comes out. MJF thinks he's going to help him. Lashley turns on him, costs him the title. They kick
Mm-hmm.
him out. And so it could have been, I think, one of those two ways in terms of how you wrap it up on camera. I think what they did was a smart pivot, but I think it was also kind of a brilliant way to end it without it being the normal wrestling ending. The normal wrestling ending is you turn on somebody and beat them down, like we see with the patriarchy. But
Yeah.
here, they played into what actually brought him into the Hurt Syndicate in the first place, which is his
Mm-hmm.
relationship with MVP. So for MVP to go, hey, the guys really weren't keen on you anyway. Um, and I'm sorry, I got to side with the guys. But then to pull him and say, hey, man, look, I really think you can be a world champion. I really want you to do well. I think that was a really cool touch to it, where they reserve the beatdown
Mm-hmm.
for if for some reason MJF, starts talking out the side of his face, evokes their name, then the beatdown happens. But other than that, they're able to just kind of part ways and
Mm.
move with it. So I feel like this is a wrestling problem where we're just seeing a storyline pivoted on the drop of a dime without whatever the ending or resolution was supposed to be happening.
I find it interesting that we didn't get the typical thing. The reason
Hmm.
I find it interesting is because that makes me ask questions. Because the two scenarios that you came up with in terms of MVP being MJF, sorry, being close to the championship, either winning it and bragging and everyone gets upset, or they get upset beforehand and cost him the title or the chance of winning the title. Both of them make sense, complete
Hmm.
sense. Could have easily worked out fine. No one would have a problem. When it happens like this, that's when the questions start. Why does it happen like this? Why was it a quiet word in the corner? Why was it not in the ring or during a match or, as you said, the typical wrestling thing? And I think it's that then creates the questions within fans, whether it be fans or journalists or whoever. Um, but sometimes, as you said, you know, these things just happen. It doesn't always have to be some kind of malicious or reason behind it. And MVP's got some issues with so and so and blah blah blah. But like I said, it does raise questions. It's
Hmm.
unfortunate that then those questions get turned into news reports
Right.
and we get what we get and had what we had in the middle of last week with MVP's name being in the middle of confrontation and whatnot. But I think sometimes as well, even as journalists, there are certain things that you don't have to jump on top of every single news story.
Right.
You don't have to jump on every single on top of every single news story, blow it up, all that kind of thing. Sometimes
Hmm.
things happen
Yeah.
and you run with it.
Yeah.
And as you said, the way they dealt with it, absolutely fine. It shows a human side of wrestling
Yeah.
as opposed to just fighting and beatdowns and whatnot. There was a human
Right.
side to it, an honest side to it. MVP said, "Yeah, I agree with the guys." So,
Hmm.
and it wasn't a thing where MJF then gone crazy and beat up MVP and walked off. It was
Right.
just, oh, okay, cool,
Hmm. Hmm.
boom, done, one and done. But yeah, man,
Yeah.
it's crazy how quickly we can hear a story, turn it into something. But I think the interesting thing as well, you were talking about journalists putting out stories and we believe in and us believing it straight away. And you mentioned the whole thing with Karrion Cross and the contract. The other part of it that's interesting as well is that now that Cross has gone
Hmm.
and his contract, everyone seems to think it's a work. Like, what's that about? We thought that the our truth stuff was a work when he came back. Oh, it must have been a work if he's back. And I know that we had the whole thing with Seth Rollins that was a work,
Hmm.
but surely not a week later are we gonna get another work like that?
Yeah. Yeah, this is again the issue with wrestling fans, and I want to be careful with this. I don't think wrestling fans are as cerebral as we need to be. Uh,
Mm,
Let me give you a couple of context clues. So, to your point, number one, what pro wrestling isn't going to do is keep running the same play over and over again. Not plays that are as intricate as what we've seen. So for instance, if you go back to the R-Truth situation, the R-Truth situation was very, very real, right? What people did not pay attention to was the fact that 22 million people shared a tweet and
mhm,
the insane outpouring that happened both outside of the ring and inside of the ring for our truth. And
mhm,
so they buckled. Well, not just that, but they responded to the pressure. Here's a guy who has spent 20 plus years in the company. He has done nothing but good, and the people are asking for it. The people were chanting in the arenas for it all week long. So they responded. And it looks like it was supposed to be part of it because of how quickly they responded. You look at what happened with Seth Rollins, a well orchestrated plan. Now we look at the Karrion Kross situation. And what's so interesting about the Karrion Kross situation is there's been this groundswell for Karrion Kross dating back to WrestleMania. People wanted to see him on TV. They wanted to see him on WrestleMania, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. To me, one of the telltale signs that this is not a work is the fact that there's already merch on Pro Wrestling Tees.
True.
People don't understand is if you are working for WWE, they only want that merch being sold through WWE Shop. If you're going through Pro Wrestling Tees, you are doing it as an independent, as someone who is independent of WWE.
Yep.
So that, and the fact that that was literally out the next day, tells you that, oh, no. This is real because he's now having to make money outside of that WWE umbrella with merch, which, by the way, his WWE merch at one point was #1 in the last couple of months.
Yep.
So I think our fans are not as cerebral as we need to be. We just need to pay attention to more than just, oh my God, it's a work. Oh my God, it's a work. Oh my God, it's a work. Yeah, they're not going to do that. And so then you end up feeling really silly when you're like, oh, snap, they're on a flyer somewhere else. Oh, wow, they got signed somewhere else. Yeah, and this is also where we sit back and go, enjoy the sport. Just enjoy what's being presented on your television. And if people are no longer there, support them wherever it is that they are. Because one thing is for certain, people in this wrestling game are not going to act like we lost our jobs when we didn't.
Right.
You're not doing that. That's a different level of pulling on people's heartstrings that doesn't necessarily work out. Not in this particular environment where people are losing their jobs and it's a very difficult situation for some. So, yeah, they're not going to pull the same play 2 weeks apart.
That's just crazy.
Not gonna happen.
That would just be crazy to think that they didn't even think about doing that. But yeah, it's definitely very unfortunate that the WWE didn't renew or offer him a new contract, for sure. And shout out to Karrion Kross because he's a follower of the page. He's been vocal on the page in the past and whatnot. But I think wherever this man goes, it's going to be, wherever he turns up first, it's going to be crazy. And if I think about where we could go, obviously, the first two options being AEW, TNA. Of the two, I think TNA would be brilliant. It's somewhere, obviously, he has history as well.
Yes.
He had a time in TNA alongside Moose at one point as well. So that would make it even more interesting. But like I said, wherever he goes, or wherever he turns up first, it's going to be big news because of the the pull that the fans were trying to call for him and chanting his name too, and all these kinds of things. So it's interesting to think as to why the WWE didn't pull the trigger on another contract. But they have their reasons, of course. And again, he's going to be someone who's going to be absolutely fine not being in WWE, possibly better off. And I see him kind of, in the space where he could possibly do something very similar to a Drew McIntyre. To where Drew was kind of, he was supposed to be the next one and all that kind of stuff, and it didn't work out. Gone to the Indies, made himself so undeniable that when he came back to WWE, and now look at where Drew McIntyre is now. So I think it's very possible Karrion Kross could do something very similar to that for sure. But yeah, people need to stop doing this whole thing where everything's a work, everything's a joke, everything's AI, everything. You're not like You know what I mean? Look at the signs, the small things, the big things, all the rest of it, and it will give you a better idea of how things are going. With all of that said, we have come to the end of our time. Gerard, let the people know where you will be, where you are doing the work, where you are making real appearances, all of that stuff.
Well, of course, you can check me at Bonnerfied across all of the social spaces: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, X. You can check me out there. Of course, you can check out my work with Ashe Wrestling at AsheWrestling.com. Of course, on our YouTube page as well. Our last 2 full shows are there: Return of the King and Ashe 10. We're getting ready for Ashe 11, which is going to be on September 6th, just a few weeks away, where we will crown the inaugural Ashe Wrestling Women's Champion. Very excited about that. We got some news about 2 more big matches that are happening at that show. One of them, speaking of the women, it is Maya World will make her Ashe Wrestling debut, and she's going against Aaliyah James. Very excited about that one. That's going to be a fun one. And then we now know the first opponent for the brand new Pan-African World Champion, as Khan will defend against Isaiah Broner. Yeah, and if you remember, Isaiah Broner was at Return of the King. His title opportunity, there was interference from Khan, so we never got a finish for that. So it only makes sense that Broner gets this opportunity at the championship. So that, on top of the brand new women's championships that will be awarded, and it's going to be a huge show. Again, that's September 6th in Charlotte at the Slingshot Social Club. Just had a huge show with Southern Honor this past week. That should likely be posted sometime this week, as we are actually gearing up for our last show in our current building called the Action Building. And so that's going to be very, very special on September 12th. And then all kinds of other cool things. Musically, I'll be in Nashville this week for Stellar Awards week. So if anybody's out there, make sure we chat and take some pictures and all that cool stuff. So it's going to be a full week, full time, all kinds of great things happening. Again, follow me at Bonnerfied.
Wow. Guys, you can find me where the one place you need to find me, which is on Instagram, which is Black Wrestling Alliance, of course. Of course, the other place is right here every single Tuesday at 6 p.m. UK time, 2 p.m. Eastern. Work it out wherever else you are. But if you don't do that, obviously you can find us whenever you want on YouTube, of course. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, all of that good stuff. And we will keep you posted on everything that's happening Black Wrestling, and I'm sure we will talk about it as well. Guys, thank you for being with us, and we will see you again next time.